Good morning, dear friends. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Erev Shabbos, Friday, Yud Zayin Adar, 17th of Adar, 5783. We are March 10th, 2023, studying the entire Talmud, one page, one line at a time. And presently, what we are studying is Masechet Shabbat, not page one. It is the first page, but it's Beis Amud Aleph 2a, soon to be 2b. Our question, or the matter at hand, is wading our way through a debate about the interpretation of the words or larba asar. Is or what it usually means, and it's a kind of time that's light, daybreak, or something to that effect. Nagi, light. Or is it, as Rabbi Yehuda says, Layli, nighttime? The only way, or larba asar, could mean nighttime, as we've been trying to say, is if we could bring proof that the word or is occasionally a noun, a certain time of the day described as or. And our Gemara has gone through several verses which use the word or. We attempt to see if it might be describing daytime or nighttime. And as it stands, we have not been able to bring any conclusive evidence, although we have certainly already perused a large number of texts, starting with the Bible, the Chumash, the book of Shmuel, back to the Chumash, and then we even went to Tehillim. Hallelujah, Kokoch Ve'ar. 4 different challenges from 4 different verses. We're not done yet. So sit back, relax, enjoy, and thank you for being here. And of course, we dedicate our learning for the well-being and health of the dear members of our Chabura and their households, and praying for only good news for all of Klal Yisrael. And so now we're going to see another question. Meisvei, another verse deploys the word or, and we're going to attempt to see if it gives us any information, any insight as to the definition of that word. So in the book of Eov, and Job, it says as follows: Leor Yakum, in the or, Yakum Rotzeach, a murderer arises. Yiktal ani the Evyon, to kill the ani the Evyon, the poor. Uvalayla, Yehi Keganav, and at nighttime he is like a ganev. So I'm almost going to ask you to ignore.
So let me make.
Hold on. I'm going to ask you to ignore the translation here for a moment, because the Gemara's translation is going to be, or this is not the Gemara, I'm sorry, the translator here may use our Gemara and the general context to already give a conclusion. They've concluded that La'or means in the evening. But let's take a look at the Gemara for a moment.
But let me just make a point. So here you see La'or Yakum Oseach. It doesn't say Ba'or. It doesn't say in the light. It says La'or. So that's why the word La'or already denotes the evening, because also the Orion.
So we haven't even made our case yet, and you're already disproving it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Let's see why the Gemara. So I understand your question. Your question is, why does the Gemara even suppose this might be helpful?
I'm not questioning. I'm explaining. I'm just giving the answer that it should be the evening, and that we shouldn't even consider that it's daytime.
So in other words, your question really is, if, and based on what is kind of obvious, why would we ever suppose that La'or should ever mean a specific time as opposed to light? So let's read again. La'or Yakum Rotzeach, at or the murderer rises up, and you'll see the translator here writes with or in order not to stake a position. But contrast that against the Evyon. I'm sorry, Uvalayla Yeheh Keganav, and at nighttime like a ganev. And so there's something that's done at or, and there's something that's done at ganav. So the question is, and let's see the Gemara's analysis, and then I share, Reb Menachem, your question a little bit. I would structure them the way I asked the question a little differently, but it's the same idea. Ha midika amar uvalayla yehei kiganav. The fact that the latter half of the pasuk talks about what happens at nighttime. Alma, can't we infer that or yemamahu? The first stanza of the verse is talking about the opposite of night, which is day. The pasuk is saying there's a certain kind of criminal who acts at or, and there's another criminal who acts at night. Usually, day and night are balance each other out very nicely in a poetic verse describing the criminals who roam at day and at night. That is the Gemara's initial attempt at reading the verse. Admittedly, the Gemara is not going to accept this, so we are going to reject it with much of the rationale that we are bringing to the table.
Well, using the poetics, actually, instead of uva laila, it should have been vela laila.
Why?
Well, if he uses laor, meaning daytime, then whoever wrote Iyov should have wrote vela laila kikanav. The fact that he uses uva laila shows, using the bet, shows that there's a differentiation between laila and or, and it's not day and night.
I don't know enough about biblical poetry to weigh in one way or another, but I'm less caught up by those specific things than the first thing that I thought you were going to say, Rabbi Menachem, is that if you know anything about biblical poetry, many times they'll say almost the same idea in two different ways. So I could almost expect actually, maybe the Gemara is going to say it. So let's hold on. Let's see the Gemara, and then we will analyze. First things first, if we start off talking about we start off talking about one thing, probably or is going to be the opposite of Laila. Rashi. Michlal, the or the reshe the kra yemamahu. We would infer that the use of the word or in the beginning of the verse is talking about daytime. V'hachi ka'amar. And this would be the meaning of the verse. And again, we're going to revisit, Rabbi Menachem, your question, my question in a moment. By yoim, in the daytime, when people are traveling, the murderer stands there. In the fork in the road, gun and kills people, and then he could take their stuff. But at nighttime, a good criminal is always busy. Daytime, he's holding people up, and at nighttime, he's breaking into their homes. And that's what this pasuk is talking about, as Rashi explains it. The Gemara says, no, I reject this assertion. Hasam hachi kamar, this is really what we meant. Ipshita. We're using here are not to mean daytime, but as a metaphor for brightness or light. If something is so evident, like when it's in the light, it's evident that he's coming to take a life. He's classified as a murderer. Bear with me a moment. And so therefore, if someone is coming against you in the daytime, you can be certain that he's coming to kill you. But if you're uncertain if this ganef is a murderer or just a thief, treat him like a ganef, and you cannot take his life. So, what happened here is we've reimagined the pasuk of Iyov, which we thought was describing a wicked person when he prowls and how he prowls. And the Gemara now reimagines the interpretation of the pasuk to be talking about when one can take a life when in self-defense, because you should consider that this bad person might be a ganev, and when you would be better served assuming that he's just a thief and not a ganev. There's more questions than answers, but let's read Rashi. Maybe it'll give us some clarity. Hachi kamar. We know that the Torah allows a person to act in self-defense and kill someone who breaks into their home. Kidichsiv, as it says in Parshas Mishpatim, in b'machteres yimatzei haganav. If you find a thief in your machteres, in your basement, or in a tunnel, the hookah, and you strike him, v'meis, and the ganev dies, the thief dies, ein loydamim, he's not entitled. You're early. Give me 1 second. Don't go. Ein loydamim, there is no responsibility of compensation by the person acting in self-defense. Why? If it is utterly evident, like light, is coming to kill, which anytime a person breaks into someone's home, we assume, except for when a father and son, as we'll see in the Gemara soon, that the person is going to murder. Or if you know it's your best friend and he's breaking into your house to give you a birthday present, surprise. The average thief understands that if someone, the owner, is going to try to stop them, they're going to have to kill or be killed, and therefore you kill first. Give me a split second. Dennis, you have a pen on you by any chance? Give me 1 second. Hang on 1 second.
That is such a dangerous situation when somebody's in your house and you pull a gun and shoot him, or take a knife and kill him.
Stand your ground.
Anybody here has a pen?
But Menachem, as far as all these stories, I think they're superfluous because they're still
I have a
saying
pen. You
one
need a
thing
pen?
is light and one thing is night. It's
Whoever
not
needs a pen,
helping
give
us
him a
to
pen.
find or.
I can't hear you. There's overlapping discussion, so I can't.
The rabbi needs a pen.
Ellie, very funny, Ellie.
That's a long pen.
Alan had it, it would work. He's there. I already left. I'm back home.
Bernie,
Yeah.
what did you say? I didn't hear what.
I said that all these stories to me seem to be superfluous because they're still saying day is day and night is night. Not helping us for that, as far as I can see.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think that the purpose of this discussion is to review the variety of psukim from different sources where those words are used to give them all kinds of interpretation. That is, it's just a study of the use of those words.
Repeat that, Professor, because we had background noise.
I think that this discussion is a study of the use of the words or and Lila in different different places in the Torah, and see how they use in a variety of senses. They're not really looking for the meaning in this particular pasuk, because at the end they will say, okay, so it's we do the search at night, as we do until this day.
I also want to know how they know so much how the thieves work.
This is
Reb Errol,
We have to behave. The rabbi's back.
Alan said.
I'll ask you a question. How do the police know so much how criminals work? They must be criminals. Otherwise, how would they know?
There's many cases where they are.
Well, that's true. Or the person who created the penal code, how do they know? Go ahead.
I think that what Alan said is important. That is, you are in a situation where there is uncertainty and you don't know whether killing is overkill or is necessary self-defense. But this is what the Torah is trying to say in this case. That is, if the situation is clear, whatever it means, so act in self-defense.
Yeah.
But if the situation is uncertain, there is uncertainty, and we don't know what it's going to end.
Err on the
Then
side of self-defense is what the Torah is saying here. Interesting, by the way, and again, I know I'm way out of my league, but there's such a thing as the castle doctrine or the stand your ground rule, which I don't think is identical, but which is a question of if a person is responsible to retreat. And in American law, sorry, not American law, it's a state-by-state issue. The common law in America, at least in the southern and western states, is usually that a person does not have a responsibility to retreat. There's a stand your ground. But I do not believe, or I can tell you that's not what the Torah is saying here. The Torah is not saying precisely the idea of stand your ground, that you don't have a responsibility to retreat. The Torah is saying if you encounter someone and in your mind it is likely that if you don't kill them, they will kill you first because they're afraid you're going to kill them, and they will not think twice about taking your life, then you can save your life. It's interesting. I'm not trying to confuse things. I just want to point out it's not purely a stand your ground or castle doctrine. It's not just because it's in your home you have the right to self-defense, but it's if the fact pattern or the situation appears to you like you're likely that your life is in danger, you are 100% empowered and responsible to act preemptively in self-defense. Alan?
You've got to be very, very, very careful with that, because I'll tell you one scenario that happened to me when I had my guns is that I woke up, something woke me up at 3 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning. And I sneaked out of the bedroom with the gun because it sounded like somebody was walking around in our house. And I sneaked out of the bedroom and I was just ready to, to point the gun at him. And, I waited to see if he had something in his hand or not. But it was my brother-in-law who lives downstairs from us in an apartment right adjacent to us. And the door was open and he was walking in his sleep.
And that's why they say that a person, even in areas where guns are legal, a person that's not well trained with a gun is a whole lot more dangerous, even in emergency, than someone not having a gun, which is a mistake that people make in Florida in particular, where they think that a gun is going to protect you, but a gun in an untrained hand could be. But anyways, let's move past that question. Let's move past that subject because it's because I want to get back to the biblical law or to the Talmud law. But the case, we have a verse that describes a murderer and a thief. And we associate the murderer with light and the thief with darkness. And initially we thought it was just a poetic portrayal of criminals who roam or act at day and night. The Gemara then reinterprets it as possibly being a metaphor for the certainty of of one's life being jeopardized. And what the Gemara's real objective or apparent objective is simply to show us that we cannot be conclusive that the word or means daytime. It could very well or just as well be a reference to light, brightness, clarity, and therefore not conclusive to our question of if or means a certain time of day. Rashi takes the opportunity to give us a whole mini shir on the subject of im b'machteres, about when a person's life is jeopardized, and if a person chooses to break into your home, presumably they're willing to use, under many circumstances, deadly force, the thief that is, and therefore the Torah might equally permit the homeowner to use a defensive lethal force in their protection. And that's really the case that's being made over here. Obviously, a Jew should always defer to local jurisdiction and the rules of the Dina de Malchusa. But as far as here, we're discussing the core biblical law as is understood by the Chazal, and that's our discussion. Ribeiro?
What I don't understand, and I said that when you were gone, how does this story help us? In this story, it seems that day is day and night is night.
I don't understand. What do you mean? How would it have helped us, or how does it not help us now?
The use of the word or here, does it help us explain it by telling these stories?
What story? Not story.
Okay, these things about a thief, etc. It still says or is light and then light is light.
Is or a time of day, or is it light? And it could be either. The initial reading seems very much like the balance of the verse indicates that it's dafka, a time of day, or a certain time of the day, as opposed to when it is bright outside. But now that we re-envision the possibility that the pasuk is talking about a metaphor of certainty, certainty is or a light is an analogy for certainty, not day. It's as light as day, but it's not a time, it's a kind of brightness. And therefore, we are not able to conclusively use this verse to tell us that or means night or daytime. It means bright. That, I believe, is what how the Gemara answers this question. Or means light, not day. Now, day and light have a lot in common, right? Because daytime is the hours where it is light outside, and that's why this is a little bit of a subtle and possibly confusing discussion. But although they're related words, they are very much not the same. Daytime and light. Rebel, you're muted, so we cannot hear your.
Okay, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I didn't have anything to say. Rosalie was.
Okay, no problem. So the
When she walks by, it gets bright.
Good gesagt, Rebel. You'll live to fight another day. All right. Now let's see another verse, another challenge, also from Eov, also describing light or night and day, or light and bright. Let's take a look. And we should open this verse of Eov as well, towards the beginning of Eov. And this is a distressed Eov. If you know the story of Eov, he was a well-to-do, prosperous man who suddenly lost everything, and he was not having a good day when the chapter 3 opened up, and so he cursed the day of his birth. Vayikalel es yoimai. He said, "I should have never come to be." Yoivad yoim. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm getting ahead. Anyways, perish the day on which I was born, and the night it was announced, the male has been conceived. May that day be darkness. May God above have no concern for it. May light not shine on it. So a lot of the key words of our discussion, light and dark and day and night, are being referenced here, but we are looking out for a specific word, and that word is or, right? May darkness and deep gloom reclaim it. For the purpose of this discussion, we'll rely on this translation. May a pall lie over it. May what blackens the day terrify it. May obscurity carry off that night. May not be counted among the days of the year. May not appear in the month. I think we can get the point, which is Eov is using this very, very poetic and very pained language to talk about how terrible it is that he ever came to be. May that night be desolate. May no sound of joy be heard in it. May those who cast spells on the day damn it. Those prepared to disable Leviathan. Here's our verse. Yechshechu koichvei nishpai yikav le'or v'oyin. May its twilight, again, this translation is really, may the stars be darkened. Yikav le'or v'ayin. Let it hope for light, but there is no light. Oh, you see, I already fell into the trap here. Yikav le'or, hope for or, v'ayin, but there is no or. Al yireh ba'afape shachar, and may you not see the glimmering of day. So we're talking about a dark night, a state of night, seeking day or seeking or, v'ayin. So what does this sound like? Let's go back to the Gemara. Meisvei, another pasuk on the same, possibly giving us clues to the definition of or. Yechshu koichvei nishboi, the stars of Neshef, of twilight, should be dark. Yikav le'or, seek out or, ve'oyin, but there is none. And there will not be seen the glimmering lights of morning. Midika Omar, based on the verse, it says, Yikav leor va'ayin. You will hope, you will wish for or, but there is none. Alma or Yemamahu. We can see that or should be day. Rashi. Yikavla or yitzapeliyim. Afape zihor shining. Linahoira.
Rabbi, a quick question.
Hold on. A question that's immediately related to the very words we're reading?
Yes, because
Okay.
the quote is laor, and then the answer or. By dropping the lamed, they're changing, for me anyway, just looking at it.
Let's see. Yeah. Yikav le'or. You will want or. V'ayin, there is none. Alma or yimamahu. Presumably, the solution to get out of a dark nightmare of night would be to turn on the day, to begin the day. See, I'm already mixing up our metaphors and already stepping on it, in it. Hassam, the Gemara says, no. The Gemara is giving us a little mifarish, a little shiur on Eov. The Gemara says, stop for a moment and think about the context of this verse. It's Eov cursing his mazel, saying how terrible his mazel is. Omar, and this is what he was trying to say. Yehi Rava de Litzpe Hach Gavrol in Ahoira, may it be your will that this person himself would wait for Nehoira, light, Veloy, Lachsheche, but he won't find it. So it's not that he's waiting for night to end and day to come. He's describing a person that's looking for Ladavar HaMeir, something that gives light off. Eloi Sheyehei Shem Hayoim or Veloy Ka'amar Yikav L'Yoim Ali Yikav Sheyar V'Oim. He's in the dark and he's hoping for a light. It's not that he's in the night and he's hoping for day. Rebbe Nachem, your question stands, which is after we've established that we might want to default and try to read a verse and see if it's talking about light before assuming it's talking about day, then really the question doesn't start. We read the verse and we can almost immediately infer the answer. I don't have anything more on that to share, except for it's clear that the Gemara desires to go review all these verses and understand them and give us some clarity. And so this is verse number 5 or 6, actually. 2 verses from Eov, where we use the word or, and on a superficial level, it may have meant daytime, but with a deeper reading, it's clear that the actual intention here is to describe light, which is not the use of or in our context, and which was night, and therefore it seems to support. I'm sorry, it can't weigh into our question, to our issue here, which is if or means night. But what's clear from this verse is that or means either light or daytime. Let's see another pasuk. Back to Tehillim. Oymar, achoshech yishufeni, darkness will surround me. The Laila and night, or Ba'adeni, night is or for me. The or about me shall be night. What we see here is that we're contrasting Lila and or. The contrasting of Lila and or most likely means Lila is night and or is day. And this should maybe be a proof, not a proof for Rav Huna, but a challenge to Rav Yehuda, who wants to say that or means nighttime. If we're contrasting Lila and or, then it's going to mean day. Alma or Yamamahu. From here we see that or is a description for day, or a word used for day. The Gemara says no. Here's how you understand this verse and tell them. Hasam Hachi Kamar David. This is what David was trying to say. Ani Yamarti. I thought to myself, Rashi, Mipnei Chatai, because of my sins, Sha'af min ha'olam haba itared, I thought I'm going to also be chased out of the world to come. Ani Yamarti Achoshech Yishufeni L'olam haba. I thought I'll be enveloped in darkness in the world to come by virtue of my sins. Shu doim elayim. And olam haba is like day. How so? Rashi, v'achshav shemachali al oisei avein ach min ha'olam hazeh shayisi shari boy b'choshech v'cherpa heir ba'deini shedikas baruch l'soini David b'mei shloim shemachal David k'shvikish l'hachinis aron l'mikdash. David Melch says, I thought I'll be enveloped by darkness. But now, even in this world, which is like a dark time, or ba'deni, I had the lights on. Or ba'deni here doesn't mean daytime, it means light. It's light during the night. Now that I know that I've been forgiven, even this world, which is like darkness, is light for me. That being the case, it cannot be derived from here that the word or describes the day. It describes light. Now, can or still mean day? Yes, but this verse is not going to be the conclusive verse.
Rabbi,
Yes.
the difference between day and light is obvious when you hit northern territories where during the winter you don't have day, don't have night hardly.
Therefore, what?
Therefore, light and day is not automatically synonymous.
Oh, you're saying it's not a synonym. I hear you. I hear you. Give me 1 second. So you're right that we can find odd places, and pardon me to anyone that comes from like St. Petersburg or Leningrad, which I think there are times where it's light at night and dark at day.
Even Edmonton in Canada.
Edmonton or Greenland, but that's not the norm. Can we all agree that, generally speaking, certainly from the understanding of the Talmud and Jewish law, there's a correlation between nights generally being dark and day generally being light? And all we've accomplished at this point is to be inconclusive. We haven't disproven that or could mean day, and we have not disproven that or could be night. But many of the verses that seem to be in the contenders to give us that definition have been rejected based on a re-examination of the verse, and at the very least, it is not conclusive. We are now going to challenge the notion that or means day, but not from sukkim, but from halachic texts that give us information about bedikas chametz. And based on these texts, it would not make sense to presume that or means daytime. And so this is the next phase in the conversation, and we're going to now be challenging Rav Huna's interpretation that Orla Arba Asar means the 14th Erev Pesach in the morning. Meisvei, a challenge. Here's how it reads in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. This is a Mishnah that we have not yet learned because it's the next Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, when do you do it? Bidikas chametz, boitkin or Larba Asar. Excuse me. Shachris uv'shas habir. We check or Larba Asar and Ba'arba Asar Shachris and Mishas habir 3 times to check for chametz. Let's think a little bit about this statement. If he gives us a shopping list of 3 different times, one of them is or, and one of them is shachris, what can we pretty strongly infer from here? That or does not mean shachris, or does not mean daytime. Alma, from here we can infer or tahu, it's a description for night, which precedes shachris. And here the Gemara says a surprising word, shma mina. This is a pretty solid and conclusive proof. Or, in the Mishnaic context, seems to mean nighttime. Rashi, the time of Yehuda, you're probably wondering if we already did Bedikas Chametz, why would we have to do another Bedika? Rashi says, don't worry, hold your horses. Later on in our in this chapter and in our Masechta, we're going to discuss all of this. But for the purposes of our discussion, it's clear that or cannot be daytime, or means nighttime. Shma mina. So you might think, my dear friends, honored members of the Chabura, that at this point we can move on from the question of or. Unfortunately, that would be a mistake. The Gemara is going to spend a little more time challenging Rav Huna.
Rabbi,
Really
I imagine
we're really putting the nails in the coffin of that opinion. Rabbi Beryl, go ahead.
they're going to come up where or is used as day, I'm sure, without looking.
No, well, it's not such a chiddush that or would mean day, you understand. There's a very close connection between light and day. The chiddush really is, the surprising chiddush is that we might use the word or to describe nighttime. Now, Rabbi Nachman is going to tell us what he's talking about. We already established that or does or le means the night before. But again, that was only established or verified by our Gemara and by the use of this language in the Mishnah. Absent that language, I don't know where else in modern or even in ancient Hebrew texts we have that use. My speculation yesterday remains, which is that probably in the time of the Mishnah, it was a way of expression. And that's why it was used in the Mishnah. The Mishnah was not a vehicle to create or influence Hebrew language. The Mishnah was an expression to communicate ideas. So if we use this language, or la'arba asar, I think we could presume and we can infer that this was a way of speaking. But we don't have any other sources really that make that case for us. And therefore, this Gemara is ultimately going to be a proof to that linguistic expression or construct. Let's see the Gemara a little further. We're going to keep on beating up on Rav Huna. We're going to keep on... Yes, Professor.
I think I would like to see more explanation, not of the or Hoshek, but of the search, because this...
For chametz or the search for the definition of or?
No, for the definition of search, because the search, how we understand it today, is not activity that is sufficient for removing chametz. Even actually, it's just a play for education of children. What we do, we remove the chametz, and the Gemara seems to ignore this part of our activity by using the term search.
Allow me to try to reframe your question, which is a very good one. It seems like once upon a time, the primary elimination of chametz happened on bedikas chametz, the search for the chametz. Today, however, we might spend a week or a month or a year searching for chametz, and so the bedika, the search, is really only symbolic. And that's actually how do we prove this? Because we put around little pieces of chametz, right, Alan? You mentioned that because we're probably not going to find chametz otherwise, because the house has been utterly clean. So what is the function of this searching? And is there an obligation to do earlier searching? Are we making people crazy for no reason? So these are important questions. I must tell you, the whole Gemara we've done so far is all on the first word or. There's going to be exhaustive discussions on the function, purpose, timeline of the bedika of searching, and when one would be responsible, and what if you leave town, and can you sell? And so we're gonna spend a good bit of time probing exactly that question. So it's a good question. The gist of it is that it is symbolic, but it also has a function, at least in its construct. But I think the best way to do justice to the question, which is an important, very important one, and I think we need to keep our eyes peeled for when the Gemara is going to devote a page or two on that very topic. Now I understand why you brought the question up now, because we are quoting texts that describe the process of Bidika, and so it's not crazy to ask the question, but I want to convey that these texts are all being brought in, although they talk about searching for chametz, only to really identify the primary question, which is what or means or what or does not mean. So let's do one or two more questions. Meisvei, a challenge to Rav Huna, who thinks that Bedikas Chametz happens in the daytime. And thus the word or means day. When or from when is one not meant to do malacha work on Shabbos? And once again, this is a subject we're going to discuss later on, that there were communities that had a minhag not to do work on Erev Yantif. And so the Brisa says, in the areas where one does not do malacha on Erev Yantif, when do you stop working? Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Omer Mishas Ha'or. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says it's from or time. Shas Ha'or, that's an important language. Again, it's not biblical. It's Mishnayik, but nonetheless, Shas Ha'or, the time of Or. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishas HaNetzach Chama, it's from the time of Netzach Chama. What do we seem to see here? Well, let's see. Amar le Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, who says or time, pushes back against his debate partner Rabbi Yehuda. He says like this: Jewish tradition, the restrictions of a Shabbos and a Yontif are for a 24-hour period. Since when might one be allowed to start working until sunrise? Amar le responds back Rabbi Yehuda, your own words. I'm sorry, hu atzmai Erev Pesach Yochiach Shemiksasei Mutar Bechilas Chametz Umiksasei Azar Bechilas Chametz. It's a day that part of the day you can eat chametz and part of the day you cannot eat chametz. That's the conversation. But now, for our purpose, Midikam Rabbi Yehuda Mishas HaNetzach Chama, and the fact that Rabbi Yehuda says from Netz, from sunrise, Alma or the Kamar Blazer ben Yaakov Urtahu, is it not clear that the language of the first opinion, Mishas Ha'or, is talking about nighttime, which again is not Rav Huna's opinion. It is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. The Gemara says, no, loy, I could push back and say, my or, what does or mean in this context? Amud HaShachar. The very beginning of daybreak, when the sun, the first star, begins to rise. And in Netz, we know we already see the sunrise. And or means Amud HaShachar, the first light. The dispute of the Tanaim is not whether the prohibited labor begins at night or morning. It's the definition of morning, dawn or sunrise. The Gemara says, hold on a second, it doesn't really work. Let's go into the debate. The Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov challenges Rabbi Yehuda and says, since when do you divide a day in half? He'd be challenging his own opinion. What is that? Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov would be self-contradictory if that's the interpretation. The Gemara says, no. We still cannot prove that or means night, because this would really be what Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov said. My opinion makes sense. You know why? I believe that we could find times that the rabbis change the halachic status of daytime and nighttime. So we know that most fasts you can eat until Amud HaShachar. According to Rabbi Yehuda, sages sometimes break up a night and a day. And so Amud HaShachar would be a very good time to delineate between a night and day. But Netzach Chama is already into daytime. So why would you be breaking up daytime itself? Amar lo, he answers, hu atzma yichiach. Shemiksase mutar b'achilas chametz, umiksase asar b'achilas chametz. And you know what? Rabbi Yehuda says, actually, no. Erev Pesach is a day that is divided in an atypical manner. Shapir Kamer le Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Eliezer. How does that make sense? Hachi Kamer le Rabbi Eliezer. Amein Allah, Hanam Allah, Rabbana va'at amis lechametz deraisa. I'm talking to you about a rabbinic optional issue. The non-malacha is not biblical. How can you talk to me about chametz, which is a biblical issue? How can you say that you can compare a biblical prohibition and permission to something that is derabanan? The idach, so how would he defend himself? Sha'ais derabanan. I'm reading this fast. V'idach harchako da'avad rabbanan l'deraisa. Period. Okay. Now I want to read this with you in the Steinzal so we can have some clarity, and then we'll call it a day. Again, we have a text where we use two words, netz, hachama, and or. And there's two ways to understand this conversation. Either or means night, or means amod hashachar. It would be easier to say, not easier. It would make our case if or meant night. So now the Gemara needs to try to reimagine or reverse engineer the conversation and see if we could project our new interpretation that we're talking about Amud HaShachar. So now let's read Rabbi Steinsaltz, and then we'll call it a day. With regards to the matter on the discussion, the Gemara infers from the fact that Rabbi Yehuda says Malacha cannot be done from sunrise. We would infer that Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says is evening, nighttime, which would support Rabbi Yehuda and disprove Rav Huna. But the Gemara says no. What does or mean? It means dawn. Amud HaShachar. The dispute of the Tanoim is not whether you cannot do work at nighttime or in the morning. The debate is from which time in the morning you cannot do work. The Gemara says that doesn't work. If so, what was the conversation between Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, who says, have we ever found a precedent for a day that's divided in half? He would have had an easy answer. We're both troubled. We both have the same problem. Isn't there the night during which Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov himself permits performance of labor at night? So he would not ask a question that would challenge himself. So the Gemara says, no, actually, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov made sense. This is what he was saying. According to me, I know that sometimes a day and a night is divided. For example, fasts. But according to you, when you say Netzachama, do the rabbis ever divide a day itself? Rabbi Yehuda then answers, Hu atzmo yechiach, Erev Pesach proves that the day could be divided in half. Part of the day you can eat chametz, and part of the day you cannot eat chametz. Until now, that was what I explained before, and that way I hope we could understand. The Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda had a good answer to Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, that we divide the day in half. How can Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov push back? The Gemara says very simple. Rabbi Elazar says, I'm talking about melacha, which is midrabanan. And you're trying to tell me that we can draw a correlation between eating bread, which is biblical? When it comes to Torah prohibition, Hashem said, here's when you can, here's when you can't. But as halacha is determined by the Torah. On the other hand, when Chazal make a gzeira, they need to do things clearly. They always make a gzeira with an entire day, or not. The Chazal would not break up a day in half. That would be the pushback or the challenge of Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. So the Gemara says, hold on a second. How would Rabbi Yehuda answer this question? The Gemara answers, Rabbi Yehuda says, the hours, the time that you're not allowed to eat chametz on Erev Pesach is actually only midrabanan. And so it's the rabbis themselves who break up the day when it comes to chametz. And therefore, it is a very good precedent to say that just like the rabbis break up a day to say you could eat chametz until a certain time and then you can't, the same thing should be with malacha, despite the fact that the prohibition by Torah law is chatzos. The fact that we stop eating before chatzos in the morning hours, that's midrabanan. So therefore, we see that Rabbanan sages make ordinances that apply to mixas hayom, part of the day. How would Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov now not sound like very foolish? Because Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov challenged Rabbi Yehuda by saying that how can you divide up the day in a rabbinic matter? And we've proven that the rabbis themselves divide up the day. So how would Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov defend himself? Gemara answers. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov would say like this: Chazal establish harchaka. They broaden the parameters of the prohibition so we don't get in trouble. The degree of this type are at times in effect only for part of the day. But when they make a totally separate ordinance, such as not doing melacha, that they do only for an entire day. So again, we have a interesting form of Gemara over here, where we wanted to prove the definition of or to say that Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov is talking about nighttime. We pretty rapidly dispatched that as not pshat. But once we reimagine the word or to mean Amud HaShachar, which means the first light, we needed to rethink through an entire dialogue. And so the Gemara held our hands and reread the Brisa with a conversation back and forth and explained how it could be sensible from Rabbi Yehuda's perspective and Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov's perspective. If the rabbis will make a gezerah splitting up a day, Rabbi Yehuda says absolutely, we have a lot of precedent. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says no, the rabbis don't split a day in half. The Torah might, the rabbis might add an hour, a buffer, but when we make a new enactment, namely the enactment of not doing melacha on Erev Yontif, the rabbis are all or nothing. It's a whole day or no day. But for our purposes, what have we accomplished after all of this dialogue? Or we cannot prove the definition of or from this brisa, because or here does not mean night or day, it means first light. Well, if I would have told you that 2 days into Pesachim we're still trying to define the very first word of the Mishnah, you might have been surprised, but I have good news. Our Gemara did take the position. Shema Mina, the Gemara said, we know that or means the night that precedes. But the Gemara is going to yet challenge a few more lines to probe and explore the meaning of or, the reason behind this use. And obviously, here's what I think we need to understand. The Gemara is probing the word or, but the Gemara, I believe, has an objective to give us this broader shiur on the word or. So although the narrow question is, what does or mean? The Gemara here is comfortable giving us a shiur in many different verses in the Torah that use the word or, and then exploring braitot that use the word or. So I think the narrow objective is the definition, but the broader objective is to incorporate these questions and these thought processes in the oral tradition in the Talmud. My dear friends, thank you for your patience.
Rabbi, the Yiddish expression sums it up. Ich zog tog, zogst du Nacht.
Something like that. It might sound like that. Anyways, dearest friends, Ayasher Koyach, have a good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
And please join us next Monday as we move to the light.
Amen. Shabbat shalom, guys.